Question from Shinka. Don't have a last name or any other information, but thank you for the question. I love octave and I love chamber music. I think the combination of the two would be amazing. I agree. I agree, especially in the new studio, which is, not to get sidetracked, but the new studio is purposefully built to sound a little more live, which is perfect for things like chamber music. For example, take one of the late Beethoven quartets, the deep cello with a combination of the other instruments and a DSD 256 recording would be stunning. So how about branching out into chamber music? I'd start with the later Beethoven quartets. Being a chamber musician and an audiophile, a rare combination, true, mostly because musicians don't make so much money and it can be kind of expensive to be an audiophile with all the gear. I think octave would be superb. I very much agree with this. Since we've gotten into our own space, which only happened in this last year in 2022, it really seems like it lends itself, one, to the Steinway that's in there that sounds incredible, but also to stringed instruments. And I think it's because a lot of times when you do recordings of strings, you want to do it in a hall, some sort of a live room, so you get that room sound. The cool thing about our studio I've been in a number of recording studios at this point, and the big difference between octave and most of the studios I've been in is octave, again, was purposefully built to sound live because we want that room noise in there. All the recordings that we're doing at this point, we have room mics because we want to capture the room because the room sounds good. Most studios are as dead as you can make it, and then you kind of add stuff later. Add your reverb later or whatever it is you want. But because of what you're saying, octave, chamber music, DSD 256, all of these things, I agree. And we actually recorded a project a few months ago that is chamber music. The instrumentation, if I remember correctly, piano, string quartet, which is typically two violins, a viola, and a cello. And then we had a flute, I think it was a flute, and maybe a clarinet. There were two wind instruments. Don't quote me on that. But it's not classical. It's not going to be Beethoven. It's a modern composer, and I know you might be thinking, ugh, cringe. So much of the modern music that you hear with orchestral instruments is not palatable. It's really hard to digest. It seems like it's purposefully written to be difficult to listen to, like they're playing a joke on us to see if we will say that we like it. There's a composer that I stumbled across in Colorado named Gustav Holst, and I started looking into his music, and it's very soundtrack feeling. It's very epic. It has a vibe that feels pretty good to me, and I don't always like a lot of the modern orchestral chamber compositions. I do lean towards more classical. If you're going to go chamber music, I lean towards more classical. But this composer I actually really like, Gustav Holst. If you want to look him up on streaming, that's where I listened to his stuff originally before he came in and recorded. But he wrote quite a bit of new music just to record for octave. I think he used maybe one or two older pieces that were very beautiful that we wanted to include. But he and his son, Gabriel, actually, gosh, I don't know how old Gabriel is, but he's definitely not more than 25. I think he's probably older than 15, younger than 25. But he came in and assisted, and they worked on this album with Paul. And I just heard the final mixes maybe a week or two ago, and they sound great. You're right. The chamber music strings in DSD 256 is amazing, and you do want to hear that. So I will be interested to see how some modern compositions that are not, they're not going to be known, they're not going to be the classics like Beethoven. I'm curious to see how those will be received. But I do think this music is very beautiful. That's not to say that we're not working on doing some classical recordings, because we've had a lot of requests for that. I know that for DSD recordings, that's a lot of what people want to hear. I get classical and jazz are the two most requested genres that I get emails and all sorts of communications for. Those are the requests that I get. So we're working on it. I do find that it takes a little while because we have so many projects going at one time. My last count was 12 projects that we have in various stages going right now. So I try not to get too many things lined up so we never finish anything. I'm trying to kind of finish these 12 projects before, or at least half of them. You know, let's finish 6 before we jump into a new, probably some classical recordings and some more jazz. But I appreciate the question. We are definitely thinking in the same vein right now on doing more classical and chamber music specifically, because our studio is really going to work for that. So thanks for the question.